Rule your mind, or your mind will rule you. Buddha. These ancient words open the door to everything you are about to discover. The quiet truth that inner freedom is not born from always doing what you want, but from learning to guide your own mind with softness and clarity. In a world that glorifies spontaneity, the absence of limits, and impulses disguised as freedom, Buddhist wisdom reminds us that a life without direction can become a gentle prison. Tonight, we will walk together along a path where discipline becomes tenderness, where structure stops being a cage and becomes liberation, where every chosen habit can weave either chaos or peace, through stories of the wild ox that becomes noble only through patience, of the shadow that vanishes when we stop running from it, of the exhaustion that does not come from life, but from a mind that never rests, of hope reborn from a single spark, of karma reminding us that no one walks alone, and of the fullness that already lives quietly within you. This text invites you to return to your own center, not to impose a path on you, but to show you that clarity arises when you no longer scatter your energy. That peace appears when you stop fighting reality, and that true freedom blooms when you return to yourself with honesty and tenderness, choosing a clear path instead of collecting techniques. Today, the word freedom is often heard and repeated like a modern mantra. Be spontaneous. Be authentic. Do whatever you want, whenever you want. At first glance, the idea seems seductive, wide, radiant, filled with infinite possibility. But if you pause, breathe more slowly, and look from the center of your being, not from impulse, but from awareness, a subtler truth emerges. A life without structure can become a soft prison, a confinement made of uncontrolled impulses, constant distractions, and inner forces pulling you in different directions. At first, any form of order feels like a limitation, setting a time to eat, another to train, another to rest or meditate, makes the mind protest like a child losing its favorite toy. Why can't I follow my whims? Why can't I do what I feel in every moment? Yet precisely there lies the deepest teaching. What you call desire does not always arise from your essence, but from unseen habits and impulses you have mistaken for freedom. And an invisible habit can govern your entire life without you ever noticing. Ancient traditions did not incorporate discipline to domesticate humans, but to liberate them from themselves. They knew that without a frame, even a small, gentle, simple one, the mind scatters, becomes entangled in fleeting desires, and is dragged by emotions that shift like the wind. But when there is a minimum order, repeated with tenderness, energy settles, confusion diminishes, and inner life becomes like a lake returning to calm after the storm. Teachers often explained this with short tales. One day, a novice asked why he had to wake, eat, and train at the same time every day. The master, with a slow smile, answered, "The human heart is like a wild ox. If you let it roam free without guidance, it will destroy the fields. If you hold it with patience, care for it, and guide it, in time, that same ox will walk beside you and make the earth fertile." The novice understood then that the rope was not punishment. It was care. It was direction. It was the possibility of transforming an untamed force into a noble one. The mind works the same way. At first, it fights structure, resisting, rebelling, trying to break it. But little by little, when discipline is lived as refuge rather than obligation, something deep begins to order itself. Urgency stops commanding. Impulse stops ruling. And the human being slowly ceases to be a slave to internal storms. From the outside, discipline appears harsh. From the inside, it is a softness, the softness of not being dragged by every fleeting desire. The softness of being able to say no with serenity, even when something tempts you. The softness of knowing your life is guided by consciousness and not by whims. Culture insists that freedom means having no limits. But the wise teach that true freedom is the ability to choose from clarity. And clarity only comes when the mind has been guided, polished, steadied like the ox, learning to walk beside its keeper. There was a time when one believed freedom was simply following every impulse. But with years and careful observation, the opposite becomes clear. The real loss of freedom occurs when you cannot stop, when you cannot break a habit, when you cannot step out of the loop of your repeated desires. Structure, this small external order, is not the death of freedom. It is its origin. The solid ground that allows you to walk without losing yourself. And when that inner order settles, when the inner voices stop pushing you in so many directions and your energy finally finds its channel, you discover something the modern world has forgotten. Freedom is not a chaotic leap, but a slow, conscious, peaceful step taken in the direction your heart has chosen with truth. The need for structure, the true origin of freedom. In the modern world, we speak often of freedom and frequently confuse it with the total absence of limits. Many believe living freely means letting desire set the rhythm, letting impulse choose the direction, letting every fleeting sensation become a command one must obey. But when you look at life more calmly, not from haste but from the heart, another truth appears. Without structure, freedom becomes fragile, and the human being ends up enslaved by what he believes he is choosing. Every form of discipline feels rigid at first. Setting hours to eat, to train, to rest, to meditate makes the mind protest like a child, unwilling to let go of its favorite game. Why can't I do it whenever I feel like it? Why not follow my impulse? Yet what we call impulse does not always arise from inner wisdom. Most of the time it comes from invisible habits, ancient conditioning, desires that repeat without reflection. And as long as those habits continue to rule, a human being mistakes reaction for freedom, when in reality he is being pushed from within without realizing it. Ancient traditions never used discipline to chain the will, but to return it to clarity. They understood that, without even a minimal structure, the mind scatters, stirs, and jumps endlessly from desire to desire. But when there is order, even a small and gentle one, energy organizes itself and the soul finds its natural rhythm again. Teachers often illustrated this through a simple example. The story of the wild ox. A young disciple once asked why he had to live according to schedules and seemingly strict practices. The master, sitting in the shade of a tree, answered calmly, "The human heart is like a wild ox. If you let it run freely, it will devastate your fields. If you tie it with patience, if you feed it, if you care for it, in time it will walk beside you and make the earth fertile." The young man then understood that the rope was not punishment, but protection. That discipline did not crush his freedom, but gave it direction. That the brute strength of the ox, when guided with kindness, became a noble and useful force. The mind functions the same way. At first, it resists, fights any form of order. He wants to break everything in order to follow what seems to be desire, but is only inertia. However, When structure is lived with gentleness, when it does not force but accompanies, something profound begins to occur. Urgency loses its power. Agitation settles, and a person begins to walk from awareness, not impulse. From the outside, discipline appears austere, but from the inside it feels like a softness, the softness of not being dragged by every sudden longing, the softness of being able to stop when you need to, the softness of choosing from clarity rather than whim. For true freedom is not doing everything one wants, but being able to say yes or no from a place of inner lucidity. A mind without structure shakes like a horse without reins. It runs, tires, stumbles, and ends up dragging its rider with it. A mind with structure resembles a river that has found its course. It flows with strength, but does not disperse. For a long time, many of us believed freedom meant following every impulse, but with the years, with the gentle observation of the human heart, we discover that the real lack of freedom appears when one can no longer stop, when a desire dictates life without one even noticing. Structure that small, everyday frame is not the enemy of freedom. It is its origin. The solid ground on which an authentic choice can be planted, and when the mind stops fighting, when the inner ox no longer drags but accompanies, you discover a freedom that does not depend on impulse but on awareness. A freedom that does not feel like an explosion but like a slow, steady, silent step taken in the direction your heart has truly chosen. Not imposing your own path, the stillness of allowing each being to advance at their own rhythm. In spiritual practice, one of the most common misunderstandings is believing that what transformed us deeply will inevitably be what transforms others. It is a human tendency. When you find relief, you want everyone to find it. When you discover a path that illuminates your life, you wish to take the people you love by the hand and guide them along the same trail. But the inner path cannot be hurried. It does not obey our urgency or our good intentions. Each heart hears the Dharma in a different tone, and each being awakens with the light they are ready to receive. Ancient teachings have always been clear. There is no single path, no single rhythm, no single way to reach peace. Each person is born with a karma, a story, wounds, strengths. These differences, which sometimes feel like obstacles, are exactly what determine how each one accesses truth. That is why the mission of a guide is not to mold others according to their own experience, but to offer their understanding of the world like water to a traveler. The traveler chooses whether to drink, how much, and when to continue. It is said that on one occasion, a group of disciples asked the Buddha why his teachings appeared different in different places. Sometimes he spoke in parables, other times in silence, sometimes pointing to suffering, other times to compassion. They asked, "Master, why do you change the way you teach?" And the Buddha replied with serene clarity, "I am only a pointer of the way. To some I show direction with words, to others with silence. To some I give tools, to others questions. Not all travelers walk the same, so not all my indications are the same." Those words were not filled with solemnity, they were filled with humility. Deep down, they were saying that what you see in me is not a mold you must copy, but a reflection inviting you to find your own way of awakening. Later, teachers continued this attitude. They said that a true guide is like a finger pointing to the moon. It fulfills its function, but knows its purpose is not to draw attention to itself, but to what lies beyond. Whoever keeps staring at the finger misses the moon. Whoever keeps staring at the teacher loses their own path. That is why, when accompanying another being in their inner growth, one must walk with gentleness. No one is dragged. No one is convinced. No faith is planted by force. Authentic faith is born from direct experience. From that silent instant when the heart recognizes something as true. This is often forgotten because we want others to suffer less. We see someone's confusion, fear, or exhaustion, and the impulse arises to tell them exactly what to do. But if you observe carefully, you will see that imposing never brings relief. It only creates resistance. Deep growth appears only when a person decides on their own to take a step inward. Through years of accompanying different practitioners, it has been seen again and again that the same teaching reaches each person like a river, taking the shape of the vessel that holds it. Some receive the same phrase and feel an invisible door open. Others hear it and walk past it because their moment has not yet arrived. Others keep it without understanding. And months later, it blossoms within them without anyone explaining it. The Dharma is not imposed, it germinates. And this understanding brings great serenity. It frees the guide from the burden of transforming others. It frees the student from the idea that they must follow someone else's exact experience. Each being has a sacred rhythm and a maturation time that cannot be sped up. Just as a seed does not sprout before its shell is ready to open, the human heart awakens at the precise instant its inner weight turns to light. Curiously, when you stop pushing others, when you stop insisting that they understand what you have understood, the relationship becomes deeper. The teaching flows naturally, softly, almost imperceptibly. There is no noise, no debate, no pressure. There is only presence, a presence that invites without demanding. And that silent invitation holds a power no insistence can match. It has been seen in many faces and many stories that even when the same guidance is offered, each person hears it from a different inner place. For one, a phrase is comfort. For another, a question. For another still, merely a breeze they cannot yet grasp. That is why you cannot tell everyone what they must do. All you can do is sincerely share what life has revealed to you and trust that each will take only what they need. Sometimes the guide feels tempted to believe they know what is best for others. But life constantly shows that every soul has its own inner teacher, its own rhythm of revelation. One accompanies but does not direct. One offers light but does not force anyone to walk under it. One points to the moon, knowing each gaze will rise when the heart is ready. And so a profound truth emerges. Teaching born from respect bears firmer fruit than teaching born from insistence. When you honor another's freedom, you allow them to find their own spiritual voice, not a copy of yours. That is why, when you speak from experience, not from the pretense of being right. You do not say, "This is the correct path," but "This is the path that, when I walked it, brought me peace." And that difference, subtle as it is, changes everything. It is no longer an order, it is an offering, not a command, but a gesture of openness. And in that openness, the teaching stops being a burden and becomes a gift. Over time, you learn to look at each human being with humility. Like a traveler who has received an invisible map only they can decipher. And then compassion deepens, because you finally understand that no one walks behind you or ahead of you. Each one walks the path of their own awakening, even if sometimes our steps coincide. In this understanding, you discover something beautiful. Sharing your path is an act of love. Expecting others to follow it is an act of fear. And love, when it is true, knows how to let go, how to accompany without imposing, how to show the moon without asking that it be looked at. For the one who is ready to see it will lift their gaze on their own. The deepest fatigue is born from a mind that never rests. There is a kind of exhaustion that is not cured by sleep. It is a tiredness that persists even when the body has rested enough. A fatigue that accompanies every gesture of the day in silence. It does not come from physical work or daily life, but from a subtler place, from a mind that keeps running even when the body tries to stop. In modern life, this restlessness has become so common that many believe it is natural. You eat thinking about what still needs to be done. You work dreaming of the moment you will rest. You rest worrying about tomorrow. And so the body is in one place while the mind is somewhere else. That separation, that quiet split between where you are and where you think you should be, is what exhausts you. The body moves in one rhythm, the mind in another. And in that lack of synchrony, energy leaks away like water escaping from a bowl through a crack no one can see. When a person lives like this, it is not the day that tires them, but the thinking. Not the activity that weighs on them, but the constant anticipation. Not the past that hurts, but the endless repetition of what no longer exists. This is why ancient teachers spoke so insistently about presence, not as a refined concept, but as a medicine. A medicine for the scattered soul, the restless heart, the disordered energy. They knew you did not need to change your whole life to find peace. You only needed to return, again and again, to the point where your feet touch the ground. It is said that a young disciple observed his master with deep admiration. The master always seemed serene, even in the simplest tasks. When he drank tea, he did so with a calm that radiated to everyone around him. When he walked, his steps held no hurry. When he spoke, each word fell like a drop into a still pond. One day, the disciple asked, "Master, why are you always so at peace? How can you stay so calm no matter what happens?" The master smiled, lifted his cup of tea, and said, "When I drink tea, I drink tea. When I walk, I walk. When I work, I work." The disciple, confused, replied, "Master, I do that too." And the teacher answered gently, looking at him as one looks at someone who has not yet noticed the door in front of them, "No, my son, you do not do that. When you drink tea, your mind is somewhere else. When you walk, you are thinking about arriving. When you rest, you are thinking about what you left unfinished. You are in a place physically, but your mind is very far away. That distance is what exhausts you. My peace does not come from doing less, but from being whole in what I do. I am where I am. I do not divide myself." The disciple fell silent. In that instant, he understood that the master was not describing an extraordinary ability, but a way of inhabiting life that anyone could cultivate. When the mind and body reunite, even the simplest tasks become nourishing. Rest stops being a struggle. Work stops being a burden. A human becomes like a lake whose surface settles the moment the wind ceases. The energy that once scattered in 1,000 directions returns, and with it clarity. But living in presence does not mean forcing the mind to stay still, for the mind naturally moves. It means making peace with its movement and gently inviting it back, again and again, to the present moment. just as you take the hand of a distracted child, without anger or demands, simply with tenderness. Come back here. Human suffering, if observed honestly, rarely comes from the present moment. We suffer for what has already happened and cannot be changed. We suffer for what has not yet occurred and may never occur. We suffer for the stories the mind creates to protect us, but that end up hurting us more. The present, by itself, is almost always kinder than our ideas about it. A breath is just a breath. A step is just a step. A sound is just a sound. But when the mind wraps each thing in memories, fears, expectations, or judgments, the simple becomes heavy, the light becomes dense, and the ordinary becomes exhausting. Vital energy blooms when there is unity between what you do and what you think. When you eat and only eat. When you rest and truly rest. When you work without carrying the anxiety of the future. Deep fatigue disappears, not because you do less, but because you stop dividing yourself. Division is what wears you down. Presence is what restores you. It is said that when the mind returns to the body, life returns as well. Because life can only be felt in this moment, not in thoughts that come and go like clouds. Perhaps, when you look at your day, you discover that you have rarely inhabited a single moment fully. And not because you don't want to, but because no one taught us how. The world trains us to produce, not to be, to anticipate, not to feel, to run, not to remain. That is why reclaiming presence is an intimate act of freedom, the freedom not to give your energy to what does not yet exist or what has already ceased to exist. It has been seen in countless beings that peace arrives when you stop chasing it in the future and begin nurturing it in the small things. A sip of tea taken with awareness, a step made with gentleness, a breath that reminds you that you are alive here and now. These gestures, seemingly simple, open cracks of light in the heaviest routines, and then a quiet understanding appears. The mind grows tired when it lives far from life, when it returns, when it reunites with the body, when it surrenders to the moment. Fatigue dissolves like mist at dawn, for true energy does not come from sleeping more, but from being more, from being where your hands are, from being where your feet stand, from being where your heart beats. And when, finally, you allow your mind to inhabit the same place as your body, you discover a calm that does not depend on circumstances, a calm that stays with you, a calm that does not break, a calm that, as the Master once said, arises simply from this, being where you are, not dividing yourself, not fleeing from the present moment. How to continue when hope seems to fade. There are moments in life when the light seems to drift away, moments in which you, who have sincerely tried to move forward, feel that every step is heavier than the last, not because your body lacks strength, but because your heart lacks clarity. You wonder whether it is worth continuing, whether your efforts are bearing fruit, whether you will ever feel the peace you seek. Hopelessness does not always arrive as a cry. Sometimes it comes as a quiet whisper, as a shadow that slowly spreads while you carry out your daily tasks. You do not notice it at first, but it is there, weakening your will, making you believe that nothing will change. Yet the ancient teachings insist on something your mind may have forgotten. True hope does not disappear easily. What breaks is not hope, but the story you tell yourself about it. Deep hope, the kind born from the heart and not from immediate results, is more resilient than you imagine. It hides, perhaps grows faint, but it does not die. Two forces sustain that hope when you can no longer sustain it alone. The first is the presence of other beings who walk with you, even if their steps do not align exactly with yours. The second is an ideal, a quiet purpose, a vision of what you long to become that remains steady even when your emotions shift like the wind. In spiritual life, no one is meant to advance completely alone. Even the most solitary meditator is nourished by the unseen presence of those who walked the path before him. There are companions in practice, sincere friends, silent teachers, beings who appear at the exact moment you are about to fall. Some stay for many years, others appear only for an instant, but they leave a trace that strengthens your spirit in your darkest days. This force I speak of is neither grand nor dramatic. Sometimes it arrives as a simple phrase, a small gesture, a look that recognizes your fatigue without judging it. It is like a lantern another traveler lights for you when your own lamp has run out of oil. It does not illuminate the whole path, but it lights enough for one more step. And that step, when you take it, is already a victory over hopelessness. The other force is born deep within you, in a place unaffected by success or failure. An ideal, a purpose, an inner vision that remains intact even when your mood rises and falls. When you reconnect with that vision, it no longer matters how many times you stumble. What sustains you is not the certainty of arriving, but the intimate certainty that continuing makes sense. Buddhist teachings speak gently about this. Progress is sometimes invisible even to the person experiencing it. The mind interprets the lack of visible results as lack of advancement, but that is not always true. To illustrate this, teachers told a simple yet wise story. A young monk, after months of practice, felt deeply frustrated. He believed he was not progressing. His concentration remained weak, his mind restless, and doubt filled his heart faster than he could empty it. One day he decided to abandon monastic life. Before leaving, he went to say goodbye to his master. The elder listened without interruption and, when the young man finished speaking, said calmly, "Son, during these months, you have gone to the well every day. You filled your bucket with water and, on the way back, you spilled it before reaching the monastery. You think you have brought nothing and believe your efforts were useless. But look closely. Thanks to those trips, the path to the well, which was once rough and full of stones, is now smooth and easy to walk." The young monk lifted his gaze. "I'm surprised." The master continued, "The water did not reach the monastery." "Yes, but every step you took transformed the path. And tomorrow, when you walk it again, your feet will feel the difference. Do not judge your practice by what you see, but by what becomes possible because of it." The monk understood then that inner progress is often silent, that the work that seems to produce nothing is in fact transforming the ground where you will walk in the future. His hopelessness had been born from impatience, not truth. This story repeats itself in many hearts. One believes they are not advancing because visible results do not appear. But the spiritual path deals with dimensions the immediate eye cannot perceive. Every conscious breath, every moment of patience, every refusal to react impulsively, every return to the present moment, each one, even without dramatic change, is clearing the inner path. And here, the deepest understanding emerges. Hope does not arrive from the outside. No one can give it to you. No one can impose it. True hope is born from the silent act of continuing to walk even when you see only a few steps ahead. It is born from a determination that does not shout, does not demand, does not boast, a determination that simply does not abandon. There comes a moment along the path when the heart says, with a voice only you can hear, I am still here. Despite everything, I am still here. And that phrase, so small, is a flame that does not need to be large to guide your night. When hopelessness visits you, remember this lovingly: you are not failing. You are in one of the most important stretches of the path. You are learning to walk not from motivation, but from conviction. Not from enthusiasm, but from understanding. Not from certainty, but from quiet faith. And if you remain attentive, you will see that, even in your darkest moments, there is a thread of light that never breaks. A warm presence within you that says, do not stop. That voice is the voice of your awakened heart. The part of you that knows the value of each step, even when your mind does not yet see it. You continue, not because everything is easy, but because you know every effort leaves a mark. You continue because hope, true hope, is as stubborn as life itself. You continue because within you there is a place that has already seen the destination, even if you have not. And perhaps one day, when you look back, you will discover that what you believed was barren ground was actually the soil where your strength was sprouting. That the path that once felt harsh now shines with a new softness. That hope never went out. It was simply learning how to burn from within. Karma and gratitude, the gentleness that opens true wisdom. There is a silent truth, often forgotten amid the noise of the modern world. No one becomes who they are by themselves. Even when the mind, in moments of pride or isolation, believes everything has been earned alone. Life is always whispering another story, a story woven by invisible hands, by small gestures, by presences that shaped us even when we did not fully understand them. From the beginning, every human being is the fruit of countless causes and conditions. Parents, with their virtues and their wounds, offered us a body to inhabit and a world to begin in. Teachers, formal or unexpected, lit lamps we perhaps did not appreciate until many years later. Friends, companions along the way, even those who seemed to cross our path by chance, influenced the direction of our inner journey. Though we sometimes forget their importance, they remain like deep roots, supporting the tree even when unseen. The Buddhist teaching on karma speaks not of punishment or reward, but of interconnection. It reminds us that we are a knot within an immense web of relationships. Every word received, every gesture shared, every embrace, every piece of advice, even every wound participates in forming our character, our view of the world, the way we love and the way we suffer. When you see your life from this broader perspective, a gentle understanding arises. You have not walked alone even a single day. That understanding is the doorway to gratitude. And gratitude, far from being a fleeting feeling, is a way of seeing an invitation for the heart's hardness to soften so that wisdom can enter. It is said that one day, a man burdened with resentment approached the Buddha. He had long felt that life had treated him unfairly. His heart was full of complaints and unresolved wounds. The Buddha listened without interrupting, with that infinite patience that is born only from a deep understanding of human suffering. When the man finished, the Buddha took a bowl of water drawn from a nearby pond. The water was cloudy, full of dirt and leaves. He handed it to the man and said, "Take this bowl outside. Leave it in silence and observe." The man obeyed and sat with the bowl in his hands. At first, he saw only the dark water, the floating dirt, the disorder. But as time passed, something began to happen. The sediment started to sink. The particles that once clouded the water slowly settled at the bottom. Little by little, the surface grew clear. He could see through it. Transparency had returned effortlessly, simply through stillness. He came back with the bowl in his hands. The Buddha looked at him and said softly, "Do you see? This is your mind. The resentment you carry is like the dirt that clouds the water. If you stop agitating it, if you allow stillness to enter, everything settles. Gratitude is that stillness. When you give thanks, the heart stops stirring, and what once seemed dark becomes clear." The man understood that gratitude was not a forced act, but a way of allowing the heart to rest. When the heart quiets, what once felt unjust reveals itself as part of a larger tapestry, and what once seemed insufficient begins to show its true value. A mind that does not give thanks lives enclosed in itself, measuring what is missing, comparing itself to others, trapped in the belief that everything should be different. That mind stirs like cloudy water, unable to reflect anything. But the grateful mind softens, and in that softness, it begins to see clearly. Why does gratitude open wisdom? Because a grateful mind stops fighting reality. It allows itself to observe, to understand, to receive the lessons it once rejected. Even pain transforms when viewed with gratitude, not because one must justify what happened, but because one recognizes that every experience, even the difficult ones, contributed to the way you walk today. Perhaps there were teachers you did not want. Perhaps there were losses that still hurt. Perhaps there were moments when you felt completely alone. And yet, if you look calmly, you will see that those very moments pushed you to seek an inner path. They forced you to stop, to look inward, to discover a strength you did not know existed. Gratitude does not deny suffering, but it wraps it in understanding. And in that understanding, suffering finds its place and loses its destructive power. Over the years, accompanying many travelers in their search, the same truth has appeared again and again. The more a human being gives thanks, the less alone they feel. And that sense of not being alone, that quiet certainty that others have participated in your growth, is what gives you strength to continue even in the darkest stages. One who gives thanks expands. One who does not give thanks contracts. Gratitude does not always arrive as a warm emotion. Sometimes it comes as a calm acknowledgement. Yes, this hurt me, but it also shaped me. Other times, as a sigh of relief, I would never have come this far without those who supported me even when I didn't notice. And other times, as a silent awakening, I am not walking alone. I never was. And when that understanding settles, even a little, something shifts inside you. A light turns on, not large, but steady. Difficulties still exist, but they no longer crush you in the same way. Challenges still appear, but you find yourself steadier, calmer. For a grateful heart knows how to look at life with the eyes of one who recognizes interdependence, and that vision frees you from the weight of ego, from isolated pride, from the false belief that you must carry the whole world alone. Gratitude opens the door to humility, and from that humility arises a quiet wisdom, the wisdom of one who no longer struggles against everything, but walks with everything, the wisdom of one who, through gratitude, discovers that there were always hands holding him, even in the longest silences, beginning change in the place where something in you says, "This is not right." On the inner path, the first step toward transformation is neither grand nor spectacular. It does not arrive wrapped in clarity or luminous revelations. Sometimes it appears as a soft discomfort, a tension in the chest. That silent feeling accompanying you through your tasks and gently whispering, "You cannot continue like this." That whisper is sacred. For true change never begins with force or violence. It begins with intimate honesty, with the courage to look at something inside you and acknowledge without adornment, "This hurts me. This steals my peace. This is not in harmony with who I am." Most people spend a long time trying to ignore that discomfort. They try to fill it with noise, tasks, distractions, but it does not disappear. Because what is born from the heart is not extinguished by entertainment, it only calms when it is heard. Every true transformation begins when you attend to that small inner call. And that call always points to the same thing, a mismatch between what you expect and what is actually happening. That mismatch creates tension, as if two different directions were pulling you at the same time. When you do not recognize that conflict, your energy fragments. You feel tired, irritable, confused, without knowing why. But when you look at it gently, when you allow yourself to say sincerely, "This is hurting me," the heart begins to organize itself. Because clarity is born from the courage to see. Yet, to truly see, you need space. When the mind is surrounded by noise, external noise and internal noise, it cannot easily discern the source of its discomfort. Everything seems mixed, past with present, fears with facts, memory with imagination. That is why a pause is necessary, a brief retreat, even within your own home. A moment of silence where you can breathe without hurry and observe what is happening within you. Ancient teachings speak of this with profound delicacy. The masters explained that in the face of suffering, it is essential to distinguish between what truly wounds us and what our mind continues to recreate. They told the parable of the two arrows, one of the simplest and most powerful teachings left by the Buddha. A disciple asked, "Why do I suffer so much for things that have already passed? Why do wounds I have already lived continue to hurt as if they had just occurred?" The Buddha replied, "The first arrow is the inevitable pain, loss, illness, betrayal, disappointment. That arrow strikes everyone. Because to live is to be touched by suffering. But the second arrow is the one you shoot yourself, the constant remembering, the interpretation, the story you repeat again and again. The first arrow wounds the body or the circumstance. The second wounds the mind and sometimes an entire life. This teaching does not minimize real pain. It offers clarity. Human suffering, for the most part, does not come from what happens, but from the narrative we add on top of it. The mind, trying to protect itself, repeats the harm, analyzes it, exaggerates it, projects it into the future. Without realizing it, it turns a single wound into many successive wounds. That is why, when you wish to initiate deep change, the essential question is not what happened, but what in what I am feeling comes from the event, and what comes from what I think about the event. Authentic transformation begins there. When you distinguish between the two arrows, suffering stops expanding like a shapeless shadow. It acquires boundaries. It becomes clear. And what is clear can be tended to, what is confused cannot. Often, when accompanying those seeking clarity, the same question arises: does it hurt because of what happened, or because of what you are telling yourself about what happened? And when the person pauses, breathes, and looks inward, they almost always discover that the second arrow is deeper than the first. The original wound has long stopped bleeding, but the mind has not stopped touching it, opening it, holding it. Seeing this is not a reproach, it is a liberation. Because if the pain remains alive due to an inner story, then there exists the possibility, gentle, yet real, of changing that story, of letting it go, of allowing it to rest. Life does not demand that you forget immediately what hurt you, but it does invite you to stop feeding it. It invites you to observe how your mind sustains the suffering and how, at the same time, it can begin to release it. When you make that small act of clarity, change becomes possible. Your energy, once trapped in repetition, begins to flow toward healing. Your gaze, once fixed on what was missing, turns toward what you want to build. And most importantly, you stop feeling powerless, not because the external changes, but because you discover your inner power to transform your relationship with what happens. Everything begins with a simple gesture, listening to the discomfort in your chest and asking yourself honestly what it means. Not to blame yourself, but to understand yourself. Not to judge yourself, but to accompany yourself. The inner path never asks for perfection, only sincerity. And when you finally acknowledge that soft voice within you, the one that says this hurts here, you also recognize another truth. That recognition is the very beginning of relief. Suffering loses its shadow when looked at with clarity. Transformation does not begin when circumstances change, but when you decide to stop shooting yourself with the second arrow. Silence returns. Energy comes back. The mind softens. And in that space, like an inner dawn, you discover that the path toward change has already begun. The lessons that return again and again through our relationships. In every human life, there are patterns that repeat like silent seasons. Faces change. Places change. Circumstances change. Yet the essence of the experience seems to return, as if life were insisting with infinite patience. Look here. Look deeper. You have not yet understood. Relationships, every kind. Not only romantic ones, are one of the most powerful mirrors on the spiritual path. In them, what we fail to see in ourselves becomes visible. In them, the parts that have not healed appear. The wounds we believe we have left behind. The shadows we try to hide with noise or speed. Each bond acts as a reflection, revealing not who we want to be, but who we truly are in that moment of the journey. This is why the same emotions return: the anger you thought you had mastered, the fear of abandonment, the jealousy that surprises you, the urge to control what cannot be controlled. Everything that has not yet been understood reappears in new forms, with new voices, but with the same root. It is not punishment. It is not bad luck. It is life giving you another chance to see clearly. The ancient masters explained it simply: as long as a lesson has not been integrated, life will present it again. Just as a loving teacher repeats a teaching for a student who has not yet grasped it, not out of harshness, but out of compassion. It has been observed countless times. A person goes from one relationship to another, believing the one who must change is the other person, unaware that true transformation happens only when one looks within. For relationships do not come to complete our happiness, they come to complete our understanding. An old Zen story illustrates this teaching with great delicacy. A disciple, tormented by his fears, was convinced that a mysterious shadow was following him. Whenever he walked under the sun, he saw his silhouette stretch across the ground and felt an inexplicable fear. He believed the shadow was a bad omen, a spirit, a sign that something terrible was pursuing him. He ran, hid, sought refuge. But the more he fled, the closer the shadow remained. The faster he ran, the longer and darker it seemed. Desperate, he went to his master and said, "Master, there is something I cannot leave behind. It follows me, watches me, disturbs me. What can I do to be free of it?" The master looked at him calmly and replied, "Son, to escape your shadow, you must do only one thing: stop running." The disciple, astonished, obeyed. He stood still, and then he saw what he had never seen before. The shadow was not chasing him. It was part of him, an inseparable reflection of his own body, a silent companion that only appeared threatening when he tried to flee. So it is with our unresolved wounds. As long as we avoid them, as long as we run from one situation to another, from one relationship to another, the wounds follow us not to harm us, but to be seen. What hurts does not persist to punish us. It persists because it needs to be understood. Difficult emotions, jealousy, anger, the need for control are not personal defects. They are signals, arrows pointing toward a specific place within you that asks for attention. If you do not attend to that place, life will show it to you again and again until you can look at it without fear, without judgment, without escape. People often talk about finding the right person, the ideal partner, the perfect friend, the flawless teacher. But rarely do we hear the opposite: becoming the person who can sustain a relationship with clarity. It is not about seeking easy relationships, but becoming someone who no longer repeats the same patterns of pain. When you change, your relationships change. When you heal, the dynamics transform. When you recognize your wounds, you stop demanding that others heal them for you. That is why connections are not just human encounters, they are karmic encounters. Each relationship activates a part of your inner story, a part that needs light. Some come to teach you patience, others honesty, others boundaries, others the capacity to love without trying to possess, and others, the most difficult ones, come to show you what you have long refused to face. None of this is coincidence. None of this is punishment. It is the Dharma speaking to you through life. When accompanying others on their spiritual search, the same turning point always appears. It happens when a person, for the first time, stops asking, "Why does everyone hurt me?" and begins to ask, "What part of me has not yet understood this lesson?" That small shift opens an immense path. Responsibility is no longer a burden, but an opportunity. The relationship ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a mirror for learning. Life stops being an adversary and becomes a silent teacher. A soft revelation arrives when one honestly sees their part in cycles of pain. And that revelation does not destroy, it frees. It allows you to see that repeated suffering comes not so much from others, but from what within you still has not healed. When this is understood, something deep loosens. People stop being enemies or saviors. they become simply fellow travelers. Some walk with you for a long stretch, others appear only for a moment, but all, without exception, carry a message life wishes to give you. And when at last you learn the lesson, life no longer repeats it. What once attracted you no longer resonates. What once wounded you no longer finds fertile ground. What once activated you now simply passes. Like a cloud that cannot hold your attention, freedom appears when you stop fleeing from your shadow. When you look at it calmly and say, "I see you. I understand what you came to show me." And in that moment, the shadow stops chasing you, because it is no longer a threat. It is part of you, slowly integrating into your light. Suffering, the inevitable truth, and the doorway to greater compassion. Some truths accompany every human being from birth. Truths that do not distinguish between rich and poor, young and old, wise and distracted. One of these truths is suffering. No matter how much we try to avoid it, life, in its constant change, touches us with losses, illnesses, separations, moments of uncertainty that shake the heart. But although suffering is inevitable, the way we experience it is not. Pain arrives like a wave unexpected. Deep, forceful but prolonged suffering arises from something subtler, the mind clinging to what no longer exists or fearing what has not yet come. Pain is the first wound. The story we build around the pain is the second. And it is this second wound that most often stays with us for years. The masters taught that pain is a visitor we cannot refuse, but suffering is a guest we invite to stay. And though this idea may sound harsh, it holds deep compassion. It reminds us that even when we cannot avoid loss, we can learn to relate differently to it. The ancient scriptures tell the story of a young mother who had lost her only child. Her grief was so immense, she could not accept what had happened. She wept day and night, unable to imagine life without the little being she had loved with all she had. One day, desperate, she approached the Buddha and pleaded, "Master, return my child to me. Do something. Save him." The Buddha listened to her plea with a silence full of compassion, a silence that does not judge, does not rush, simply holds. Then he said gently, "Bring me a mustard seed from a house where no one has ever died. If you can find it, your child will live." The woman ran off, full of hope. She knocked on many doors. In each home she asked, "Has anyone here ever died?" And each time she heard the same answer, "Yes, a father, a mother, a child, a husband." She walked all day. Every story of grief she heard was like a mirror. Slowly, she understood something she had never imagined. Suffering was not hers alone. It was universal. When the sun began to set, she returned to the Buddha. She brought no request, no seed, no demands. She brought understanding. She knelt and said, "Now I see that death touches every house. I am not the only one who suffers. My pain is part of the world's pain." The Buddha looked at her with tenderness. He had not reversed her loss, but he had illuminated her heart. And in that light, the woman discovered a kind of relief that does not come from changing reality, but from understanding it deeply. This story, which has crossed centuries, does not seek to minimize the pain of loss. On the contrary, it honors it, faces it, recognizes it as part of the fragility and beauty of human existence. But it also teaches us that asking, "Why me?" closes the heart, while asking, What can awaken in me to move through this pain? Opens it. When one stops believing that suffering is a personal punishment, the heart begins to soften. It no longer feels isolated, no longer fights against the inevitable. Instead, a broader, more compassionate question arises. How can I live this pain without closing myself? What is this experience trying to teach me about life, about myself, about others? What new space can open within me through this wound? We are not responsible for the storms that arrive in our lives, but we are responsible for how we navigate them. And this responsibility is not a burden, it is an opportunity. For when we stop resisting reality, suffering begins to transform. When we stop fighting what cannot be avoided, the energy once spent on struggling begins to return. When the heart stops asking, "Why me?" it begins to ask, "What is life trying to show me through this?" And in that subtle shift of perspective, light finds a crack through which it can enter. Shared suffering humanizes us. It connects us. It makes us more humble, more patient, more able to understand another's pain because we have seen our own. When you look at suffering in this way, not as an enemy, but as a stern yet honest teacher, you discover that within the wound lies a seed of compassion, a seed that can grow quietly and transform you in ways comfort never could. A mind clinging to the past suffers because it tries to relive what has already ended. A mind fearing the future suffers because it anticipates shadows that do not yet exist. But a mind that learns to remain, even briefly, in the present, finds a space where pain can be breathed without becoming a prison. Pain is inevitable. Prolonged suffering is not, and when this truth settles gently into the heart, you no longer ask, "Why did life do this to me?" but "How can I open my heart to what life is showing me now?" That openness, that willingness to look calmly, even at what hurts, is what turns the spiritual path into a journey of maturity and inner freedom. Because in the end, it is not about avoiding suffering, no one can, but about discovering within it the possibility of becoming more human, more conscious, more compassionate. And when you are able to ask yourself this simple yet profound question, how can I expand my heart to move through this pain? Suffering stops being a wall and becomes a bridge toward broader understanding, toward a truer life, toward a more complete humanity. The purpose of life, to free yourself and then help others free themselves. There are questions every human being eventually asks. Why am I here? What meaning does my path have? What is the true direction of a life well lived? Sometimes we seek answers in achievements, goals, external accomplishments. But over time, life, with its quiet wisdom, reveals that purpose is not found in accumulating but in lightening, not in climbing higher, but in becoming more human, not in shining alone, but in lighting the way where another being stumbles in the dark. The ancient traditions said the first part of the path consists in freeing oneself from fears that limit, attachments that wound, habits that distance us from calm. Not to become perfect, but to become conscious, not to escape the world, but to live it with less weight. Yet this inner process does not end with oneself. What naturally awakens in a heart that has known freedom even briefly is a deep desire to share it, not as obligation, not as sacrifice, but as the spontaneous expression of a soul that has felt relief and wishes others to feel it too. For the subtlest, most refined joy does not come from receiving, but from relieving, from seeing that someone, thanks to your presence or your words, breathes a little easier, from sensing that your experience, your healed wounds, your understanding. You can become a bridge so another does not get lost where you once did. There is a beautiful image in the teachings, that of a candle lighting another. One candle alone illuminates a small space, but a candle that lights 100 loses nothing of itself. On the contrary, it multiplies its light. The masters call it the perfect metaphor for compassion. For compassion, like the flame, does not diminish when shared, it grows. It is said that a disciple once asked his teacher, "Master, how can I preserve my light if I help so many who walk in darkness?" The teacher took a candle, lit it, and then brought it close to another unlit candle until its wick touched the flame. The second candle lit instantly. Then the teacher asked, "Tell me, son, did the flame of the first candle become smaller by lighting the other?" The disciple smiled. No further explanation was needed. This is what happens with wisdom and with love. They are not depleted by being shared. They do not run out. One who accompanies another in suffering does not lose their peace, they deepen it. One who offers comfort does not empty themselves, they become more whole. One who extends a hand does not give away a part of themselves, they expand their most authentic nature. This act of sharing does not come from heroism or external greatness. It comes from a deep recognition. We have all been held at some point. We have all received light when we were lost. And that light, which came from someone, a teacher, a friend, a stranger, even a text or a word heard by chance, left a mark on you. Now, life invites you to continue that gesture, not out of obligation, but because what you have received wants to keep living through you. When someone begins to accompany others from this understanding, they discover something beautiful. Helping is not a one-way path. Every time you support another, you also support yourself. Every time you ease another's wound, a part of your own wound softens. Every time you illuminate someone else, a quiet light rekindles within you. This is why, deep down, helping others is a way of helping your own past. Every person you meet, every being who suffers, reminds you of a part of yourself that once stood in that same place, in confusion, in doubt, in fear, in loneliness, and that you can now embrace with the gentleness you did not yet have back then. Compassion is not a doctrine, it is a memory. The memory of having been fragile, of having needed a hand, of knowing that without someone or something that held us in a difficult moment, we might not have continued walking. This is why the spiritual life is never only about oneself. One who encloses himself in his own enlightenment has not understood what awakening truly means. To awaken is to remember that we all advance together, even if our paths look different. To awaken is to feel that another's suffering is not foreign, but an echo of your own. To awaken is to understand that easing another's pain is not an external gesture, but the natural expression of a heart that has learned to be free. But for this movement toward others to be authentic, there must first be an inner liberation. One cannot offer peace from restlessness. One cannot offer clarity from confusion. One cannot offer freedom from the prison of ego. This is why the path always begins within. And it is not a linear path. You advance. You fall back. You understand. You forget. You understand again. With each step, you become a little more capable of being present for another being, not to save them, because each person must walk their own path, but to remind them they do not walk alone. One who helps from compassion does not remove the other's burden. but makes it lighter. They do not disperse the night, but accompany until the person finds their own dawn. They do not give answers, but offer presence. And presence is one of the deepest forms of liberation. The purpose of life, seen from this angle, is not to accumulate achievements, but to liberate hearts, your own first, others after. And in that movement of giving and returning, the light you carry becomes quieter, calmer, truer. In the end, what you leave in this world will not be what you gathered, but the gentleness with which you touched the lives of others, the freedom you awakened in yourself, the freedom your walking helped awaken in others. For the candle you lit in another will continue to shine long after your own flame has gone. And perhaps that is the purest way to remain. Knowledge does not transform life, conscious action does. In these times, knowledge is everywhere. You can open a book, search the internet, listen to a distant teacher, follow hundreds of spiritual paths without moving. The world has become expert at accumulating information, repeating inspiring phrases, collecting techniques, yet something persists. The inner life of many people remains unchanged, untouched, as if all that knowledge never reached what is essential. Why does this happen? Because knowing is not the same as living. Because understanding with the mind is not the same as understanding with the heart. Because knowledge by itself is like a seed never planted. It contains the potential of a forest, but does not produce even one leaf. The mind easily confuses itself. It believes reading about calm is a step toward calm. It believes hearing a teaching is the same as integrating it. It believes speaking of spirituality is the same as walking it. But the ancient teachings have always been clear. What is not practiced fades like a drawing in the sand. Knowledge can illuminate briefly, but conscious action transforms. Life does not change because you know more, but because you do something different with what you know. The masters of the past taught this truth through a simple but revealing parable. A disciple obsessed with learning spent his days studying sacred texts. He wanted to accumulate every doctrine, memorize every path, master every method, believing that the more he knew, the closer he'd be to liberation. One day, proud of all he had learned, he approached the Buddha. The Buddha, with his gentle benevolence, said, "Imagine a traveler who needs to cross a river. He builds a small boat of branches and rope and uses it to reach the other shore. The boat fulfills its purpose. Now tell me, should that traveler carry the boat on his shoulders for the rest of his journey?" The disciple replied, "Of course not, Master. That would be absurd." The Buddha nodded and added, "So it is with knowledge. Use it to cross your rivers, to move through your challenges, to advance on your path. But do not carry it as a weight or display it as an ornament. Knowledge that is not used becomes an obstacle. Knowledge that is practiced becomes liberation." The teaching was clear. Having the raft is not enough. You must row. Crossing is not enough. You must keep walking. Theory is not enough. It must become life. In spiritual practice, this is seen every day. Someone may know much about patience, yet lose their calm at the slightest difficulty. Another may understand compassion, yet react harshly when hurt. Another may speak of detachment, yet suffer deeply at the smallest loss. The knowledge is there, but it has not descended into the heart or grown roots. True realization happens when a gesture, a decision, a silence, a small act embodies a teaching. When the way you walk, speak, breathe expresses what you have understood. when your life becomes silent proof of your practice. Spirituality is not measured by the number of books read, but by the quality of presence you bring into the world, by how you respond to pain, by the serenity with which you face difficulties, by the patience you offer when others lose theirs, by the humility with which you acknowledge your shadows, by the gentleness with which you touch the lives of others. A moment will come when you must ask yourself, am I living what I know, or merely accumulating it? This question is an invitation, not a judgment, an invitation to stop carrying the raft of knowledge and begin walking with the lightness of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. Over the years, accompanying many seekers, the same truth has repeated: the one who transforms their life is not the one who seeks many teachings, but the one who commits to a single one and practices it sincerely. The one who grows is not the one who collects techniques, but the one who applies one with consistency. The one who awakens is not the one who knows the most, but the one who dares to act from what they have understood, even imperfectly. Spiritual action is never grand. It requires no heroics. It requires everyday gestures. It requires a kind of quiet courage, the courage to live according to your understanding even when no one is watching. One day you may discover that most of what you learn needed to be released, that only a few teachings were truly essential, that like the traveler leaving behind the raft, you too must let go of accumulation to walk lightly into a fuller life. And when this happens, when knowledge becomes action and action becomes a way of being, the heart understands something profound. Realization does not belong to the one who knows the most, but to the one who most fully lives what they know. It is often assumed, though rarely said aloud, that fulfillment will arrive once we obtain that missing something, when I have more money, when I find the right partner, when I achieve this goal, when things are different. But when one observes closely, one discovers that desire never stops. Gaining one thing gives rise to wanting another. The goal reached opens the door to a new goal. What seemed essential yesterday loses its shine, and a new need arises, a need that promises to complete us and then fades as well. In this way, life becomes an endless race forward, built on the illusion that satisfaction is always one step further. But true fulfillment does not obey external conditions. It does not arrive through accumulation. It cannot be bought, conquered, or obtained. Fulfillment is born when the heart remembers what it has always been. Spiritual teachers have expressed this in very simple ways, because the deepest truth needs no embellishment. One such teaching is told through the story of the empty bowl. It is said that a young seeker approached his master with a heaviness in his chest. He said he felt incomplete, never satisfied, that no matter how much he advanced in his spiritual practice, there was always an emptiness inside him he did not know how to fill. The master listened in silence. Then he took an empty bowl, held it before the disciple, and asked, "Son, is this bowl empty?" The disciple replied, "Yes, Master, it has nothing in it." The master smiled gently. "Nothing? And what about the space that fills it, and the possibility it contains, and its capacity to receive? You see it as empty because you are looking for water, but a bowl does not stop being full simply because it does not contain what you expect." The disciple frowned, confused. Then the master added, "Listen carefully. You are like this bowl. You are not empty. You are full of life, of awareness, of presence. But because you expect to feel complete through what comes from outside, you call empty everything you already are. After a deep silence, he concluded, "Everything you seek in the world is an attempt to remember what you already have." That teaching touched the disciple with the quiet force of a truth that cannot be ignored. He understood that his sense of lack did not come from reality, but from perception. It was not his essence that was missing, but his inner memory that had forgotten itself. On the spiritual path, this is one of the greatest revelations. The suffering that comes from incessant desire does not arise because we desire too much, but because we have forgotten that we are already complete at our core, that the human being is born whole. Just as a seed contains an entire forest within it, what is missing is not fullness, but recognition. When one believes oneself incomplete, one begins to run toward the future, toward objects, toward relationships that do not always bring light, even toward spiritual goals fueled by the same sense of lack that drives worldly pursuits. But when one stops not only physically, but inwardly, one begins to hear something that was impossible to perceive in the noise, the deep stillness that lives beneath all desires. That stillness whispers gently, "You are already enough. You already hold what you seek." Fulfillment never left. It was you who stopped seeing it. When life is viewed this way, a soft transformation arises. Desires do not disappear, but they lose their urgency. Achievements remain meaningful, but they no longer define your worth. Life does not lose its beauty, but it stops being a relentless chase for what is missing. It has been seen so many times. In the instant a seeker stops running, something inside begins to heal. Comparisons loosen. Anxiety dissolves. The heart recovers a more natural, more human, more sincere rhythm. And in that stillness, the most delicate understanding of the spiritual path appears. Nothing external can give you what you already are. Nothing external can complete you because your essence is already complete. The search exists only so that, once you tire of running, you may discover this truth for yourself. Many who walk this path are surprised when peace arrives, not from obtaining more, but from needing less. From remembering that the value of a human being lies not in success but in presence. Not in what one accumulates, but in how consciously one lives. This is why the masters said that every pursuit of the external is, at its core, a sign of forgetting one's own center, forgetting the silent fullness that supports every breath, forgetting that the human being is, from the beginning, fertile ground where everything already exists in potential. And when the seeker finally stops long enough, when the mind ceases its agitation and the heart finds a moment of clarity, they discover something that had always been there. They were never empty, never broken, never incomplete. They had simply forgotten, and from that recognition arises a natural gratitude toward life. A gratitude that does not depend on circumstances, but on the inner awakening that says, "I am full, I am complete, I can rest in my own existence." From that moment on, life is no longer lived as a race to obtain, but as an opportunity to express what you already are. The search becomes presence. Desire becomes understanding. Lack becomes fullness. And the heart can finally rest in its deepest truth. Fulfillment is not outside. It has always been within you.